Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of College Hockey Talk. On today's podcast, I welcome back a very special guest. Senior from the University of Minnesota Duluth women's hockey team, Taylor Anderson, returns to the podcast again. Taylor, welcome to the podcast, and how's everything going?
Hi, thanks for having me. Things are going pretty good. Just finished the season and now done with school, so jumping into summer.
That's awesome to hear, and obviously this is the third time you're on the podcast. How does that feel? One of the most featured guests that we've had on, so I think that's pretty cool to say. Out of all the
Yeah,
things
that's
you accomplish
awesome.
in hockey.
Yeah, thanks for having me so many times. I really enjoy it.
Now, obviously, like you said, the season ended about 2 months ago. So what have you been up to since then?
Yeah, so we had spring training for a bit. We got to go on spring break, which was super fun. It's always great to go somewhere warm after the cold winters in Duluth. And then a lot of school, just had finals. So now I'm finally jumping into May term training and summer now.
That's cool. What'd you do for spring break? Where'd you end up going?
A group of us girls got a house out in Florida. We were in Fort Myers, so we were out there for about a week.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool, especially that area, just because I know that's where the Red Sox do their spring training. So I don't know. I've never really been to Florida. I went there when I was like 2 years old, so I don't really remember any of it. But that's one area that I recognize just because of the name, because that's like I said, where the Red Sox do spring training.
Yeah, the Twins were actually there when we were in town for spring training, but it ended up being like a 90, 95-degree day. So we're like, maybe it's not a good idea to go sit out there right now.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. But to be
Yeah.
honest, I'm kind of waiting for those 90-degree days to come just because I don't know what it's been like up in Duluth, but it's been freezing cold, even in the early parts of May. So hopefully it can start getting a little bit warmer. So I kind of can't wait for that, to be honest, to be happening because it's been months for me since I've experienced warm weather.
Yeah, me too.
Now, what are your summer plans? Anything interesting, hockey wise or non hockey wise? And obviously, like, what are your plans? I guess, hockey wise, if that's the case.
Yeah, hockey wise, I'm gonna go home and train in the cities. I have a great trainer down there, Royalty. So I'm gonna train with him all summer and hopefully get some ice time in here and there, but mostly focus on my strength training.
That's cool. And do you plan to return to UMD for your fifth year?
Yes, I do.
That's awesome. That's awesome. How excited are you to come back for a fifth year? Just because, like, obviously heading into your college hockey career as a freshman, you didn't realize that you're going to you didn't realize you were going to get that extra year of eligibility. But obviously, the way things worked out, that's pretty cool that you did.
Yeah, I feel really lucky that the NCAA allowed that, and it's just another year you get to play with all your best friends and go for a national title again. So I think it's awesome that we get another chance.
Now, what are some things you're working on regarding your game for next season since it is your fifth year? I feel like you have the experience, you've improved a lot since your freshman year. So, like, what are some things you still want to work on heading into your fifth year?
Yeah, I think just strength. I think that's always a big part is making sure you're strong. And during the season, sometimes you don't do as much strength training just because you're skating so much every day. So yeah, going into the weight room and trying to build up muscle again and hopefully get on the ice and work on some skills, some puck handling, shooting. Those can always be improved.
Yeah, I remember I talked to a football player one time. He said it's always hard to maintain his six pack during the season just because of burning so much calories during games and stuff throughout the season. So I thought that was pretty interesting to hear.
Yeah.
Now, what do you like? What's like any on ice training that you're doing, or do you try to like wait until once you get back on the ice with the team to do that?
I usually try to focus on the ice stuff closer to the season, but I'll definitely be on the ice through July and August. And I usually work with a skating coach where we do different kinds of stride work and different kinds of one-on-one puck handling, just to kind of focus on those skills that you don't always get to pay attention to when you're in a team practice.
That's cool, and obviously with Royalty, the only reason why I know about them is their posts keep coming up on my feed, even though
Yeah.
I don't follow them, which I find pretty interesting. But I thought that was kind of like a modeling company. So, is it the same? Is it like the same thing, or is it like a different branch of it?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So it's a gym. The trainer works with all of us, and then he also started a clothing brand with all of the royalty stuff on it. So he's really branched out to be a trainer as well as selling different kinds of merch and athletic wear. And so a lot of us girls and guys who work out there get to model the clothing for him.
That's cool. Yeah, because I see that stuff pop up in my feed. So I was like curious. Like I didn't know there was like two parts of it. That's pretty cool. I heard
Yeah.
Maddie Rooney helps with that stuff too.
Yeah, that's her boyfriend's company. So she's around a lot, and she introduced us to him and has gotten the Bulldogs really involved in it.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I saw that Sydney Brock did something with it. So that's pretty cool that you got to do that. So,
Yeah.
well, that sounds like it's going to be a fun summer. So I'm looking forward to seeing how it translates on the ice for next season. It should be a lot of fun. But I
Yep.
do kind of want to transition and talk about this past season for a little bit because it was very historical for your team, making it all the way to the national championship game. Um,
Hmm.
there were obviously a lot of ups and downs, though, throughout the regular season. So, overall, how would you evaluate your team's performance during the regular season before the WCHA playoffs?
I thought we played great. I thought we had some really big series that we won and that we really needed to win. We had a lot of players who all over the board were scoring and playing well. We did have a couple tough losses in there, but I think that only helped us in the long run, actually. In the moment, you're like, wow, this is bad, but it really helped us learn how to play during those tough games and come back the next day with a clean slate and know how to win the next game.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously, like, talk about the new players on your team as well, because you had a lot of freshmen contribute to the team with some of the losses that your team had from Olympics and from graduation. So, from your perspective, what was it like getting to know the new players on the team and just talk about the contributions that they made as well?
Yeah, I think they were great. They gel with our team perfectly. I'm friends with a lot of them, super close friends. I think they stepped up into big roles. We had a couple injuries. We had the girls in the Olympics, and they all stepped right up. And in that national tournament, you couldn't tell who was a freshman and who was a fifth year. Everyone was playing the top of their game, which was awesome to see.
Now, I'm curious to ask you, is it harder to connect with the newer players every year just because there's such a wide age gap, or do you find it easier actually just because you get to learn something from them as they get to learn something from you?
Yeah, I think it's our team is really close. I think that's one thing that makes us so special is we're a really close team. So even before the season starts, we're on Zoom calls with the incoming freshmen, so they get to know a lot of us. I think as soon as they get here, we're all so excited to meet new people and welcome them in. And I find that I was actually really close with the freshmen this year, and they're some of my best friends, which is cool because I am like 4 years older than some of them, but it doesn't seem that way. They gelled perfectly into our team, and we're all super close.
Have you had the chance to meet any of your freshmen for next season or not yet?
Yep, we got to meet a couple of them. They stopped by. We got to meet them. I know a couple of them went to high school with Jenna Lowry, who is on our team currently, and so she kind of introduced us to them a bit. And they'll come up this summer too to meet us. And yeah, I think they're gonna be great for our team next year.
Yeah, and I think one of them's heading to Wisconsin for the U18 World Championships, so that should be fun as well to see that.
Yeah,
Now, a few of your teammates, speaking of like the international tournaments, obviously, like I mentioned, they played in the Olympics. Cassie Bentonall, Ashton Bell, and Emma Soderberg. So, how excited were you to see those players play in the Olympics and represent their respective countries? I thought that was really cool. Of how many different countries that the UMD Bulldogs represented in the Olympics this year.
yeah, it's super cool. It's amazing watching them on TV and being like, wow, that's my roommate, that's my teammate, that's my line mate. I think it's awesome for our program. It's awesome for them. And it was just a super fun experience to hear what they got to do and everything like that. I know Ashton Bell is back now with a gold medal, so she brought that to the rink, and it was amazing. And same with Emma Soderberg and Cass. They play each other in the Olympics too, so that was a super fun game to watch them kind of go at each other. I know Cass scored on Emma, so that was fun for the team just to kind of see that rivalry. But yeah, it's super cool for the program, and I'm super proud of all of them.
Who was it hard to like? How do you like watch a game with two teams that you want to win? I'm curious about that. That must be interesting, kind of.
I know that was so tough, especially with Canada and US because Maddie Rooney is on that team too, and and Sweden versus China. I know we were all sitting there like, "Yay, one scored!" But oh no, we don't
Yeah.
know. It was tough. We were cheering for all of them.
Now, kind of getting back to your team for a little bit, You had the opportunity to play in Washington, D.C. in the regular season. How was that experience for you guys, and what did you guys do there besides play hockey? Anything interesting?
Yeah, we actually had a day, one of the days we had off, so we were able to a lot of our families actually came out there as well. So a lot of us went with their families and went on golf cart tours and got to see the White House. So it was a super cool opportunity outside of hockey to see some of that monumental stuff in our country.
What did you get to see when you were down there?
The biggest thing that I remember seeing is the White House. That was super cool. We got to go stand right up there and get pictures. So I thought that was awesome.
That's cool. And I haven't been to DC in a long time, so I'm assuming the security near the White House is more intense than it was when I was there last time. So did you even get to like see the White House? Because I feel like there's so many gates and fences now that it's probably harder to see
Yeah,
it.
yeah, we got pretty close to it, I would say, but there was definitely like borders up and there was police in the streets and everything, and it was pretty packed. And then a couple of the buildings that we wanted to go see were closed because of COVID. So that wasn't super fun. But no, we got to get super close to the White House, which I thought was awesome.
Was that your first time in DC?
Yeah, it was.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, no, it's definitely a fun spot, especially if you're like really into history and just it's cool because you get to see like stuff you know like every time you go to history class, you see all that stuff like in pictures and things like that. So it's really cool to like see it in person, especially some of the memorials like the Lincoln Memorial. But my
Yeah.
favorite memorial was actually the Vietnam Memorial just because of all the names that were on it. And my grandfather served in Vietnam too, so that was really cool to kind of like have like I don't know, I felt kind of a connection towards that one. So that one was probably my favorite one. I thought that was very well done.
Yeah, we saw both of those too. They were great.
Now for hockey, your team got to play two teams that you normally don't get to play during the regular season. So was that a fun experience as well to get non-conference games back during the regular season, just because you didn't have that experience last year?
Yeah, I think it's fun. We love traveling, getting on the plane and going and playing teams you don't usually get to play because we do play like Gophers and Wisconsin and those teams so often that it's fun to get new competition, and especially for like rankings and further down the road when we're going to see them in the national tournament. It's great to have that under our belt that we've played some teams in their league.
Now you also guys got to go up to Boston this year as well and play Harvard.
Mhm.
How cool was that to go up to the East Coast and play Harvard? Because I feel like you guys never come up to the East Coast, and I was disappointed because I wanted to see those games, but they wouldn't allow fans throughout that series, which was disappointing for yours truly. But how
Yeah,
cool was it to go up to Boston and play Harvard?
it was so cool. Our coaches used to coach for Harvard, so there's a little bit of like home for them there too, and they knew the other team's coaches pretty well. So it was a cool series, and Harvard has an amazing campus. So we got to walk around there a lot and kind of see the buildings. So I think it was fun to get a different atmosphere than we're used to. And Harvard was a great team as well, and we ended up seeing them again. So I'm really glad we got to play them.
Yeah, I've actually never been to Harvard's campus, even though I'm from the East Coast and live like not too far away. So how was it? Like, what were some of the stuff that you found interesting from there?
I think just like the buildings and walking down the streets, they're older buildings, but they're so beautiful. So we loved like walking around the town and just kind of exploring.
Was that your first time like in the East Coast playing with Duluth, or have you guys ever played up here before? You were when you were like a freshman or a sophomore.
Um, I don't remember, but I think we've been out there before. But that was my first time seeing the Harvard rink.
And obviously that was an important sweep for your team as well to be because they were ranked at the time and obviously, help with the pairwise to get you guys up to the top five part of the pairwise ranking. So how cool was it to beat that team twice, but how tough was it and how did it prepare you for the national tournament? Because like you said, you had the chance to play them again in Duluth or in Minnesota for one of the regional games.
Yeah, I think it was great to play them so we kind of knew what it would be like when we were in regionals. It's always sometimes a little bit scary when you're playing a team you've never played before. You don't exactly know what to expect. But I feel like playing them before, we were able to, you know, look back on what happened before and look at film, which really helped us win that game.
Now, what was your team's mindset heading into the WCHA playoffs this year after having some big wins in the regular seasons, but also some tough moments as well?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, it was kind of the tough losses, I think, ended up actually helping us because it just gave us some more fire to play better. Although playoffs didn't go exactly as we expected, I think that even helped us too to, learn from it and then take that drive and some of that anger from losing and put it towards the national tournament.
Yeah, you guys had a hard-fought battle against Mankato in the first round of the WCHA playoffs, and your team eventually won that game in overtime in the final game. So talk about that series, what you learned from it, and how important was it to win that series to head on to the frozen or final face-off in Minnesota.
Yeah, I think that's super important, but I know going into playoffs, you can't look at the regular season. You can't look at how teams played against you in the regular season because when you get to playoffs, it's do or die for everyone. So I think we having that tough game under our belt really helped us because we learned how to fight and play in that moment where it's do or die. So that way, when we got to the bigger games, we already had that feeling of this could be our last game, and we kind of knew how to battle through that.
Now, obviously, when you think about the WCHA, you think about the four top teams like Ohio State, Minnesota, um, you guys, and Wisconsin. But I feel like Minnesota State seems like a team on the rise. Am I crazy to say that? Because I feel like they had some big wins throughout the regular season and could be a team that surprises a lot of people next year.
Yeah, I think they were great, especially during playoffs. We saw really, really strong players on their team, and they gave us a really good fight. And yeah, I thought it was a great game, and I could see them being on the rise. I think they have a lot of really strong players.
Now, obviously, Elizabeth Shigeru got that OT winner to send you guys to the final face-off. She had a lot of OT winners this past season, but that was just one I just want to highlight. But how cool was it to have her on the team this year, and what was it like playing with a former Patty Kazmaier winner this year? And just talk about the contributions she made to your team because she had so many unreal goals this year. It was kind of hard to pick which one.
Yeah, she's an amazing player. She's one of my closest friends now. I mean, we've only known her for a year, but she fit right in with our team. We were so excited that she chose to be a Bulldog because she's obviously helped us in a lot of those wins. Yeah, she's so calm and poised that when we get into those big games, you really see that come out because where the nerves might be, I think she has so much experience that she knows how to finish those big plays that are needed in those games. And that Mankato goal just shows that it was amazing. The toe drag around the player and then just right around the goalie was an amazing moment for our team.
Your team eventually lost to Minnesota in the final face-off. What did your team take away from that loss heading into the national tournament, especially since you had the chance to play them again in the national tournament, which we'll talk about in a second, but just talk about that loss for a little bit and what your team took away from that.
Yeah, I think it was really tough on us. Obviously, we wanted to win that tournament, but we were really lucky that our games previously had helped us get that bid into the tournament. I think it was a learning experience. We got to watch film on that game. We actually broke it down ourselves as a team and got to really see like what we needed to do to in the national tournament. And I think it would have obviously been great to win, but we found a way to make the loss help us in the long run. And it gave us that fire to then beat them again later down in the road.
Now, last year when we talked about the national tournament, your team had no clue if you were going to get in or not, partly because it was like a COVID season, but also because it was 8 teams in the national tournament, not 11. So it was harder to get in last year than it was this year. So I want to ask you, what were your thoughts on the national tournament being expanded, and how do you think it's going to affect your program for the future?
I think it's awesome that it got expanded. I know our coaches had done a lot of work for that to happen. I think it's great for women's sports in general because you see the men's side has tons of teams in that tournament. So I think it's only going to help showcase more women's teams because there are so many great ones out there. And I think it made the tournament a lot more fun this year.
Now let's talk about the regionals for a second because your team beat Harvard and Minnesota to move on to to the Frozen Four the second time in your college hockey career. Talk about those games, especially the one against Minnesota, being at their rink, and what emotions did you feel after heading into your second Frozen Four?
Yeah, I think the Harvard game was great. I mean, Gabby Hughes had a hat trick in that game, so that definitely helped us a lot. And that just gave us so much momentum going into that Gopher game. I mean, it was tough that we were on their home ice, but the great thing about being at Ritter is a lot of us girls are actually from Minnesota. So it felt like half the stadium was rooting for the Bulldogs too. I had tons of family there, so it was awesome. I think just coming together and using that drive and ending up winning that game was amazing. It was so awesome to see all of our family there. We got the hats, we got everyone was coming down to the glass. So I think it was super cool this year to have all those fans there because last year we didn't have that going into the Frozen Four. So it was cool that they all got to enjoy that with us.
Yeah, and I heard Ritter has the worst visiting locker room. Is that true?
It's a little crowded, yeah. It's a little crowded. We have some girls sitting on chairs and whatnot, but it's a great rink.
Now, obviously, I feel like it was kind of two separate games because in Harvard, you beat them in the regular season, so they're trying to find a way to beat you in the national tournament. And then against Minnesota, it was the complete opposite. They beat you in that final faceoff, so you're trying to figure out a way to beat them on their home rank. I guess, how did you try to adjust between the two mindsets between those two games?
Yeah, I think just kind of starting fresh and kind of thinking that anyone can win any one of these games, and so we have to find it within us to want it more. The Harvard game, we got had a lot of confidence in playing them in the past, and then with the Gophers, we play. It feels like we play them all the time. So I think just remembering that we're both great teams, but we really had to fight hard, and I think that really helped us.
Now you were saying like how when you lost to Minnesota in the final faceoff, your team looked at that film a lot to kind of figure out what your team did wrong to help you win that next game against them. What were some of the things that you noticed that your team did wrong in the final faceoff, and how did you correct those mistakes in the regional game against the Gophers the second time?
I think a lot of it was nerves. I mean, it was obviously a do or die situation. We didn't know if we were going to get in. We kind of had an idea, but it was a lot of nerves. And then I think the biggest thing is we let them come down and score on us first. Beginning of the period, they scored first. And then with like 2 seconds left, they scored. So that's just a huge momentum shift. And so a big thing we looked at was we got to make sure that we come out and get that first goal. And then we need to make sure that we finish out those periods for our goalies because getting a goal scored on you with 5 seconds left in the period should never happen. And I think we had to realize that we need to fight a little bit harder for our goalies in those situations.
And obviously, it feels like your team has to play the closest games in the regionals because I feel like some regional games it's like kind of a blowout. Especially last year, where I feel like that game against Colgate was like the closest regional out of all the ones that were played in Erie. So, what's it about Duluth and playing those close games heading into the Frozen Four? Is it just the style of play?
Yeah, I don't know. We joke around, so we like to keep it exciting for our fans. But I think when you get to that point, every team is so good that you just got to find a way to fight in those games. And I think we do that. We stick to our game plan. We don't try to do anything crazy and just stick with our gritty, tough play, and it helps us in the end.
Now, the Frozen Four this year was in Penn State. Talk about the experience that you had at this year's Frozen Four compared to the one you had last year in Erie, and which one did you prefer? And I guess because it seemed like two whole different experience, just because the COVID one and then this year was just like a little more normal.
Yeah, the COVID year last year was definitely a lot tougher just because we had a lot of anxiety on the COVID testing. I mean, if you test positive, you're not playing in that tournament. And we didn't get to do as much fun stuff like different kinds of big luncheons. We were eating our meals in our hotel rooms in quarantine and whatnot. And we didn't have, we had a cut, we got to have, I think, two fans come to the game. There wasn't a crowd. And so this year we had a huge crowd. That was awesome. We had an amazing luncheon at Penn State Arena, which was super nice. And I think overall, like not having COVID was great just because we got to have our families there and it was on a much larger platform this year.
That's what were some of the cool things that you got to do in this year's Frozen Four that you didn't do last year? Because I know, like you said, the luncheon, but also I noticed that there was like a red carpet
Yep.
before the game. How cool was that? And did it put a lot of pressure on yourself to put out a good outfit? Because obviously, you know, the pregame fits. It's something that a lot of players put a lot of effort into. But I feel like for the Frozen Four, you have to kind of go all out for that.
Oh yeah, us girls were planning outfits for days. We were making sure we had our top-notch outfits going out there, and I think being able to walk in the rink and see your family right there before you go into the game is a really reassuring feeling, having them by your side. So I think it just fired us up more that we knew our family was right there with us.
That's awesome. And obviously, um, from my perspective, watching the Frozen Four in Erie last year and then watching it this year, felt like it was a better viewing experience at Penn State. I don't know why. It's like I can't really explain it, but talk about that rink. And did you like this rink better than the one at Erie? And I feel like this one rink was a little bit better just because it was like an actual college hockey rink in the sense where it was like on campus. And I don't know, it felt more college hockey like than the one in Erie. So I felt like, did your team kind of agree with, do you kind of agree with that? Does your team agree with that? Because I talked to one of your teammates, Mannion, and she said she felt the same way.
Yeah, I definitely think it felt like a larger platform. I mean, the rink was beautiful. The fans were all there. I mean, we had Penn State fans even there in a student section, and they didn't go to our school, but it was awesome to see everyone there. And I think there was just much more broadcasting for the game, which is great for women's hockey. Much more cameras and interviews. So I think it made it just seem like such a bigger game.
Yeah, I heard those Penn State fans aren't big fans of Ohio State, so that's probably a big reason why they were cheering for your team.
Yeah, it was great. We had our own little Penn State fan section cheering against Ohio State, so that was pretty funny.
Now, obviously, in the semifinal game, you played against Northeastern and won in double overtime. Talk about that game and what went right in this game versus the one last year against Northeastern in the semifinals, because your team had that lead, and then unfortunately, things didn't go right in the third period, and then Northeastern ended up winning that game in overtime. This one I felt was a little bit different, where your team kind of fought back and then won it in double overtime in a very tight hockey game.
Yeah, I felt like we had much more confidence this year. Last year, there was a lot of nerves and, oh my gosh, like we really want to move on. And this year, I felt like it was a lot more calm. We were really confident in our training. We knew we had conditioned and trained to play in these overtimes, double overtimes. So I think it was just about coming out and continuing to push hard. So I think that was the difference this year is we had a lot more confidence and we really knew that we had the ability to win this game.
Now, obviously, you scored in that game as well. One question is, was it about against Northeastern in the Frozen Four semifinal that makes you such a great goal scorer? Because you scored last year's game as well, and then you scored in this year's game, and two very similar goals, I thought. So I thought that was
Yeah.
pretty interesting.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. My teammates joke about that too. They're like, you got that something about the Frozen Four. But yeah, I don't know.
But it has to be against Northeastern though, because
Yeah.
that was the two goals the team that you scored those two goals against. So I thought that was pretty funny. But
Yeah.
in all seriousness, though, like how good did it feel to move on to the national championship game, especially because like last year you lost a heartbreaking overtime game? Did it feel good to be on the other end of it for this season? And talk about the emotions of heading into your first national championship game.
Yeah, I think it was amazing to finally get to that point and come out with that win and kind of realize that all of our hard work had paid off. I mean, the loss last year, we none of us forgot about it. We thought about that the whole time and wanted to make sure that this year it went differently. So when we finally got that game-winning goal, I think it was just such a relief and just really showed us that we're such a great team and our hard work does pay off.
Now, in the national championship game, you played against Ohio State. You obviously played that team a lot since they're in your conference, but how different was this game, especially with the national championship on the line?
Yeah, I think playing them a lot, we kind of knew what to expect. And I think we're two pretty similar teams where we're physical and hard forward checking. And so I think this game was just obviously on a bigger platform and it was for the trophy. So I think that played a lot into it. But I feel like we played our game and Ohio State played their game. So it just came down to obviously who scored more goals. And I think both teams played great.
Yeah, your team, like you said, your team unfortunately lost that game. Um, I guess talk about that loss from your team's perspective, because whenever someone thinks about a championship game, they obviously think about what it's like to win one, but no one really talks about what it's like to lose one. So from your perspective, talk about that loss. How have you tried to handle it? How did you try to handle it at the moment? And what do you think, how you're going to use it, I guess, for your fifth year?
Yeah, I think it was obviously really heartbreaking when you're that close. And I mean, some of the goals were goals that we thought that we wanted to get back because they were some weird bounces there. Um, but I definitely think it was heartbreaking when you get that close and you feel like you're about to win it and then it doesn't go your way. So I think right now we have to look at like look how far we made it and look at the potential we have and that we can win that tournament next year too.
Yeah, and how has your team handled that loss? And how do you try not to focus on that one particular game when you think about the season that your team had? Just because it was a great season, but you also don't want to focus on that like one game that you don't want to make that one game, I guess, define how good your team played all year.
Yeah, I think we should look back at all the games that we had to win to get there. They weren't easy at all. We played the top team in the nation to get to the Frozen Four. And so I think just looking back and realizing we won those big games to get there, and we could have won that championship game too. So just thinking about that in training and thinking about that going to next year is going to be a huge part of our success next year.
Now, for you individually, you improved a lot from this season compared to last season, points wise, and then also just a lot of different things. I felt like you were a really good forechecker and you defended well. So my question is, like, what was like the biggest improvement that you made to your game this year that led to the increase in points that you had this year as a senior?
Yeah, I think obviously training hard in the summer, doing a ton of skills work. And then just I think a big part too is confidence on the ice. Realizing that I can make a difference out there was a big thing. I think being a senior, I knew that I needed to step up and be a leader. Um, I think those were some of the big things that I tried to focus on, just playing hard.
What type of leadership did you want to try to bring to the team this year as a senior? Were you like a vocal or lead by example? Because I know we talked about that a couple podcasts ago with yourself, but I was just curious if you became like more of a vocal leader, I guess, as the season came along for this year.
Yeah, I think I always try to lead by example in practice and in games. And I feel like as you get older, you're able to be a little bit more vocal because we have been in those situations before. So I'm able to kind of talk other players through it or share my experiences from the past. So I think as I've gotten older, I've been able to become a lot more vocal.
Now, what will be like your biggest takeaway from this past season, and how are you going to use it for next year?
I think just realizing the potential that we have, realizing how far we can make it and how great of a team, coaching staff, and everything we have, and just realizing that next year at the beginning of the season, so we can have a great run throughout the entire season.